On July 12, 1726, a man named William Fly stood on a wooden platform at Boston Harbor, a rope hanging loosely above his head. Hundreds of people had gathered to watch him die. Mothers held their children up to see. Street vendors sold bread and ale at the edges of the crowd. A minister named Cotton Mather stood nearby, Bible in hand, ready to hear a final confession, ready to watch another sinner beg God for mercy. But William Fly had no interest in God that morning. He looked at the hangman, a nervous, trembling man who clearly hadn't done this many times before, and he laughed. Not a desperate laugh, not the laugh of a man losing his mind. A calm, deliberate, almost professional laugh. Because William Fly had noticed something that nobody else in that crowd had the knowledge to see. The noose was tied wrong. The knot was sloppy. The coils were uneven. If that rope dropped with the knot sitting where it was, it wouldn't snap his neck cleanly. It would strangle him slowly, minutes of kicking and gasping while the crowd watched. So William Fly, pirate captain, murderer, and the most wanted man in the Atlantic, stepped forward and retied the noose himself. He adjusted the coils. He repositioned the knot. He tested the tension. And then he turned to the hangman and told him, calmly, almost kindly, that he should be ashamed of his work, that a professional ought to know his trade better than this. The crowd went silent. Cotton Mather stared. He had spent days trying to break this man, trying to extract a confession, trying to make William Fly an example of what happens when men reject the authority of God and King. And here Fly stood, moments from death, giving a lesson in rope work. For 300 years, we've called men like William Fly savage, lawless, monsters who deserved the noose. But what if the real story is something far more complicated and far more human than anyone wanted to admit? To understand why William Fly stood on that gallows with the calm of a man adjusting sails rather than facing death, you need to understand where he came from. And where he came from was hell. Not the fire and brimstone hell that Cotton Mather preached about on Sundays. A real one, a floating one, a hell made of salt water, rotting timber, and the absolute authority of men who answered to no one. William Fly was oppressed man. That meant he didn't choose the sea. The sea chose him. Sometime around 1720, Fly was seized from the streets of a port town, likely Bristol or London, the records are unclear, and forced aboard a merchant vessel against his will. This was legal. The British Empire called it impressment, and it was as common as the tide. If you were young, strong, and poor, the crown could take you from your family, throw you below decks, and work you until your hands bled and your spirit broke. The movies don't show you what life was really like aboard an 18th century merchant ship. Forget Captain Jack Sparrow stumbling charmingly across a sun-drenched deck. The reality was darkness. Below decks, men slept in shifts because there weren't enough hammocks. They ate biscuits so infested with weevils that experienced sailors learned to eat in the dark so they couldn't see what was crawling in their food. Fresh water went green within weeks. Disease killed more sailors than any battle ever did. And above all of it sat the captain. Absolute, untouchable. A captain could flog a man for looking at him wrong, could reduce rations as punishment, could chain a sailor to the mast in a storm and watch the sea take him. There was no appeal, no complaint, no union representative waiting to hear your grievance. William Fly endured this for years. We don't know exactly how many, because men like Fly didn't leave diaries. Men like Fly didn't leave anything at all except eventually a body swinging from a rope. But before that rope, something snapped. And what? It happened on a warm night in May of 1726. The merchant vessel Elizabeth was cutting through calm Caribbean waters, somewhere between Jamaica and the coast of West Africa. Most of the crew was asleep below decks. The captain, a man named John Green, was in his cabin, likely drunk, as he often was by midnight. William Fly had been waiting for this night. Not days, not weeks, months. He had spent months watching, listening, counting which men hated the captain enough to act, counting which men were too afraid, counting which men would fight and which men would freeze. He had found his men. A small group, maybe 5 or 6, the exact number is disputed, who shared his rage and his resolve. They moved through the ship in silence, barefoot on wet timber, carrying whatever weapons they could find. Belaying pins, a hatchet, one stolen pistol. What happened next took less than 15 minutes. They reached the captain's cabin. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be? Captain Green feared nothing from his own crew. He was the law aboard this ship. He was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The idea that the men he starved, beat, and humiliated might rise against him simply never crossed his mind. That was his last mistake. Fly and his men dragged Captain Green from his cabin. They dragged the first mate out after him. Both men were thrown overboard into the Black Caribbean water. No trial, no speeches, no ceremony, just the sound of two bodies hitting the sea and the silence that followed. Think about that for a moment. These weren't trained soldiers staging a military coup. These were starving, brutalized sailors who had been pushed past the point where death scared them more than slavery. They chose murder not because they were monsters, but because every legal avenue, every appeal, every complaint, every plea for basic human treatment had been sealed shut by a system designed to keep men like them silent. By dawn, William Fly was captain, and the Elizabeth was a pirate ship. William Fly's career as a pirate captain lasted exactly 3 months. 90 days between mutiny and the Gallows. In the grand timeline of pirate history, that's barely a footnote. Bartholomew Roberts captured 400 ships over 3 years. Blackbeard terrorized the Atlantic for 2. Henry Morgan sacked Panama and retired to a governorship. Fly captured a handful of small vessels, took modest plunder, and was betrayed by members of his own crew before the summer was over. So why does his story matter? It matters because of what he did with those 90 days. Because William Fly didn't just take a ship. He built a system. The moment he became captain, he did something that most people would never expect from a murderer drifting through Caribbean waters on a stolen vessel. He wrote a code. Every man aboard would receive an equal vote on all decisions. Every man would receive an equal share of all prizes taken. Any man who stole from the common stock would be marooned. Any man who showed cowardice in battle would be punished, but only after a vote by the full crew. The captain served at the pleasure of the men. If the crew decided Fly was unfit to lead, they could remove him and elect someone else. Immediately, no appeals. Most people don't know this, but William Fly gave his crew something that no king, no governor, no merchant captain in the entire British Empire would have considered giving to common sailors in 1726. He gave them a voice. William Fly's downfall came from the same place most pirate stories end, betrayal. In late June of 1726, a group of captured sailors he had pressed into service overpowered his skeleton crew while Fly slept. They sailed the ship into Boston Harbor and handed him to the authorities in chains. The trial was fast. The verdict was inevitable. Death by hanging to be carried out at Boston Harbor in full public view. Cotton Mather visited Fly in his cell multiple times before the execution. He begged Fly to confess, to repent, to stand on that gallows and tell the crowd that piracy was a sin against God and King, so that every sailor watching would think twice before raising a black flag. Fly refused, every single time. On the morning of July 12, 1726, William Fly walked to the gallows without trembling. He didn't pray. He didn't weep. He didn't beg. He looked at the crowd, the same kind of people who had pressed him into service, who had starved him, who had treated him as less than human, and he said nothing to them. He spoke only to the hangman, about the noose, about the knot, about doing your job properly even when that job is killing a man. And then he was gone. After the execution, Fly's body was tarred and hung in an iron cage at the entrance to Boston Harbor. It stayed there for years, twisting in the wind, a warning to every sailor who passed beneath it. The Empire wanted his corpse to say one thing: this is what happens when you disobey. But here is what the Empire never understood. If you want to hear more stories about the men and women who lived and died under the black flag, the codes they followed, the battles they fought, the mysteries they left behind, subscribe to Pirate Times because the story is far from over. Every sailor who looked up at William Fly's body didn't see a warning. They saw a man who chose 90 days of freedom over a lifetime on his knees. And some of them, enough of them, decided that was a trade worth making.